Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village are the latest installments in the long-running survival horror video game series developed by Capcom. With each game having its own unique storyline and setting, they are still connected to the broader Resident Evil timeline and lore. But how exactly are they connected to the long-standing series that became one of the biggest gaming franchises of all time? In this video, we're going to take a dive into the stories of both games and explore their relations to the rest of the Resident Evil franchise. Resident Evil 7 takes a departure from the traditional Resident Evil formula by giving us a first-person perspective and a more isolated and atmospheric setting. The game follows the story of Ethan Winters, a civilian who receives a message from his missing wife, Mia. Ethan travels to a derelict plantation called the Dulvey Haunted House in Louisiana to find her. On arrival, Ethan encounters the Baker family, consisting of Jack, Marguerite, and their son, Lucas. The Bakers have been infected with a new strain of the T-virus, which is known as the Molded. Ethan soon discovers that Mia was once part of a covert organization called the Connections, who we'll be talking about much later. They were the ones responsible for the creation and the distribution of the Molded. Their goal was to develop a bioweapon known as Evelyn, a young girl with powerful psychic abilities who we discover had taken the shape of the grandmother, who's incredibly sus throughout the entire game, watching you and appearing in places by the corner of your eye.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
There's a reason why she was an old lady, which we will also get to. Evelyn, who had been confined at the Baker house, escapes and infects Mia, leading to the events that Ethan experiences. Throughout the game, Ethan faces against various bioweapons, solves puzzles, and uncovers the truth about the Baker family's ties to the Connections. Eventually, Ethan defeats Evelyn and escapes the plantation with Mia. RE8 continues Ethan's story, picking up a few years later after the events of RE7. Ethan and Mia have settled down in a European village, hoping to leave their past behind. However, their peaceful life is shattered when none other than Chris Redfield, who's working for the BSAA, arrives and seemingly kills Mia.
You what?
Chris then kidnaps Ethan's daughter.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
And then takes her to a remote village ruled by a mysterious figure known as Mother Miranda. Ethan sets out to rescue his daughter and unravels the mysteries surrounding the village. He encounters various hostile creatures, including the Four Lords under Miranda's regime. Ethan eventually learns that Mother Miranda seeks Rosemary's unique abilities to resurrect her own deceased daughter, Eva, or Eva, how you want to pronounce it. As Ethan delves deeper into the village's secrets, he discovers that Mother Miranda is a former colleague of none other than Oswald E. Spencer, one of the founders of the Umbrella Corporation. Mother Miranda's experiments with the mold and the Megamycete fungage, which is the very same mold from RE7, have created the various monstrosities in the village. Ethan ultimately confronts Mother Miranda, but is swiftly killed by her. In a surprising twist, it is revealed that Ethan is in fact a molded creature made by Evelyn during the events of RE7. He had been killed by Jack Baker back in RE7 and had been reanimated as a bioweapon for Evelyn to control. However, the power of love and friendship allowed him to retain his consciousness and fight against the bioweapons and the mold. In a final sacrifice, he confronts Miranda again and defeats her, thus having the Megamycete vulnerable and being able to save Rosemary before succumbing to his fatal injuries. So, based on the story from these two games, there are various major players that come to mind when connecting the branch of RE7 and RE8 to the rest of the franchise. We have the Molded, we have Evelyn, Mother Miranda, and most importantly, the mysterious group known as the Connections. It is these four entities that establish the connection between these games and the rest of the series. So, let's address each of them in greater or better detail. Let's start with the Molded. The Molded are humanoid creatures, but there's nothing human about them. They feed on corpses that are given to them by the bakers, which is why they are consistently filled bathtubs all around the game. However, many of the molded feature parts of their victims on their bodies, including bones, organs, or the occasional eyeball. Additionally, while they move slow and they don't speak, they're actually a lot more intelligent than we're led to believe. Due to the way that they're physically built, the molded can't communicate through traditional means. To make up for that, they work together in groups and they can sense those who aren't like them. They are, again, a lot more intelligent than they appear to be, and they're able to navigate around certain obstacles and traps by using vents to avoid them. So basically, they were playing Among Us before Among Us was even a thing. They also hide within mold growths that they make to get the drop on their enemies, similar to how the infected in The Last of Us operate. The molded's methods of attack are also particularly insane because they strike with such rage and strength. Instead of just like attacking with normal fingers like our beloved zombies back in the initial series, the molded have long clawed hands that they use to slash and swipe. Well, similar to that of the lickers, except longer and more protruding. Other versions also have blades attached that can further injure you. However, the molded's most terrifying feature, by far, is their mouth, which is large enough to devour a human head and is filled with crazy amounts of teeth. Also, not to mention their inky black skin that allows them to hide in the dark, damp corners of the Baker house and anywhere that's essentially a dark swamp. And again, while they are slow and they aren't quick, they can keep up with you when you're not paying attention. In other words, they got that Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees energy. The molded are a departure from the traditional human corpses and mutations that have been in previous Resident Evil games. And it is this new type of enemy that essentially became the core component for both RE7 and RE8, especially story-wise, because our next subject is the one who is responsible for controlling the mold, and that is none other than our antagonist E001, aka Eveline. Eveline was created to function as a bioweapon capable of psychically manipulating people who were infected by the mold and turning their newfound subjects into the molded. As a mind-controlling bioweapon, Eveline was conceived by infecting a human embryo and a bioengineered fungoid called the mold, and envisioned as a 10-year-old little girl so as to better blend into unsuspected populace and enemy soldiers alike. Clever. This in turn gives her the ability to create excessive amounts of mold at sheer will, even creating a whole colony of fungoid to suit her needs and infecting others through sheer contact. Because she was conceived through scientific means, which included genetic alterations to accelerate her growth and at the cost of mental deterioration and overall insanity, Eveline has to be given periodic medication to halt her rapid aging and preventing her from making varied amounts of mold. And by varied, I mean a immense amount that would essentially end the world. So, take your medicine, everybody. You never know when you might turn into a giant fungoid that is going to consume the world with gross mold. In short, she can control anyone and everyone who is infected by the mold and use them as she sees fit. She can also communicate with her molded subjects via telepathy, create hallucinations with them against non-infected individuals, and spread the mold in excess amounts. As destructive as she is, her creation was proposed by none other than Miranda as a means of self-interest and also in the interest of others she worked with, which we're getting close to because I think you know by now who I'm referring to. And if not, we'll get there. Miranda was born in the late 19th century in Eastern Europe and would later birth a daughter named Eva around the year 1909. When the Spanish flu hit the village, however, Eva was unfortunately one of the many who succumbed to it, causing a lot of grief for Miranda as she had attempted to unalive herself. However, in the northern cave that she attempted, Miranda discovered the Megamycete, a fungal superorganism that gave her increased intelligence and powers such as immortality, mimicry, and regeneration. Yeah, basically she went to a cave and discovered superpowers. Seeing that she had memories of those who had come in contact with the superorganism within the Megamycete, Miranda decided to use her immortality gained by the mutation to master the art of biology and genetics in order to experiment with the Megamycete and to find a way to bring her dead daughter back. She then used the Cadou parasite, ugly thing, on local villagers to find Eva a vessel, but they would often, unfortunately, not pass and kick the bucket, or they would mutate into lichens. Despite these setbacks, Miranda continued to experiment on villagers and came across 4 people who successfully bonded with the Cadou parasite. The 4 individuals are Alcina Dimitrescu, then you have Carl Heisenberg, aka Magneto, Donna Beneviento, I hope I said that right, weird puppet lady, and Salvatore Moreau, who was possibly the most boring part of the game. But they found that they could not become Ava's vessel due to their response to the parasite. So Miranda just had them do her bidding because why not? Might as well make use of them. Basically, along with these 4, she created a presence in the village that basically gave her the dub, titling her Mother Miranda. A century later, like a whole 100 years later, Miranda would come into contact with the Connections, who offered to help her after they learned of her experiments with the mold. She agreed and gave them some of the Megamycete and her daughter's DNA, which they in turn made her their head researcher who created Eveline. Are you starting to see it come together? During the process, Miranda realized that Eveline couldn't be fit to be Eva's vessel due to her being a bioweapon, and presumably returned to the village as the Connections went on to create Eveline to be a bioweapon. So, in short, Miranda made Eveline to be the vessel for her dead daughter. Of course, for some reason it didn't work out, and the Connections were like, hey yo, don't throw her out, we can use her. Let's use this 10-year-old to destroy civilizations. Are we sure RE8's not an anime? Anyway, Eveline would escape from her confinement and infect Connection researcher Mia Winters, it's connecting again, and the Bigger family in Dalby, Louisiana. Miranda later learned, or rather she was informed, that Eveline was destroyed and that Mia was pregnant with a daughter, and realized that the child could be the perfect vessel for Eva, thus explaining her motivation to kidnap Rose, the name of Mia's baby, by pretending to be her and taking her place by Ethan's side, leading to the events of RE8. So it essentially just comes full circle. Now let's talk about the Connections. They are a crime syndicate involved in biochemical research, money laundering, murder, and trafficking of weapons and drugs. The Connections reaching out to Miranda regarding her experiments with the mold was out of their interests, thus establishing their relationship as she was made their head researcher. Mentioned that previously. Around this time, Miranda saved Oswald E. Spencer, a British noble who she saved from a skiing incident, and essentially became his mentor, teaching him how to mutate a being into something else using other life forms. The two parted ways since then, but Spencer held her in high regard as he basically took that experience along with him becoming the founder of the Umbrella Corporation. So, to put it simply, Miranda's expertise in research is the reason why everything terrible in the Resident Evil series happens. Miranda is the reason why Resident Evil exists, the entire freaking franchise, based upon the lore. So, as much as we may or may not like Miranda, at the end of the day, if not for her, we wouldn't have Resident Evil. The Connections worked in collaboration with the HCF in the year 2000 in the creation of a revolutionary new fungus. They iterated through 5 lines of subjects capable of mind control, each with successive line-given letter-based designations. The early lines, such as the A-type, which their performance wasn't really great. Then they had later lines improving upon their abilities, so you went from A to B to C to D, until finally, by the year 2014, they had made it to their idealized type, the E-type. And guess who is our E-type? It took them 14 years to essentially create a 10-year-old girl who would help them control the mold and to use mind control itself as a weapon to allow the takeover of regions without the use of more traditional bioweapons, which could create socio-economic problems as well as the needs of conventional weapons like nuclear, firearms, or chemical weapons as well. So, in short, this was one big investment, but in the long run, taking over the world could never be cheaper. With the creation of the first E-type, the E001, basically Evelyn, in the year 2014, competing companies as well as other manufacturers, weapon manufacturers specifically, became seriously concerned of their survival in the changing market, since Evelyn and other BOWs like her could render all conventional weapons obsolete. With such a valuable potential weapon at their disposal, the Connections were forced to take Evelyn into hiding after they had learned of hostile organizations trying to obtain her. As a result, the Connections transported Evelyn to another lab on the LNG carrier Annabelle, using genome codices, multiple codexes, to assist assigned handlers in keeping track of her. And those handlers were who? Alan, or Alan, based upon spelling, and Mia Winters. I mean, Alan not being a Winters, but we don't know what Alan's second last name is, but no, who cares? But Alan and Mia. However, the ship that they were on, taking damage, because Evelyn lost control of herself, the tanker exploded, knocking her out, causing the ship to drift to the Louisiana Bayou, where they essentially found her and left her there because that was the best way to hide her, in a swamp. And by the beginning of January 2015, the Connections had set up a lab in the Abercrombie salt mine, provided Lucas Baker, the son of the Bakers, with the serum needed to keep Evelyn together, and enlisted him as an agent. Lucas kept in contact with the lab, keeping them up to date with Evelyn's condition while in hiding. Prior to July 2017, within the lab, Lucas and staff also created new variations of the molded, the WM001, and its offsprings, the WM001A and the WM002. However, it is unknown if these experiments were meant to create a new series or they were just individual BOWs. They knew that with Lucas's association, they could keep their prized Doomsday device safe. However, we've seen the events that took place and saw the Connections weapon fail. For now. So in summary, Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8 provide a fresh take on the series while maintaining ties to the wider Resident Evil timeline. Resident Evil introduced us to a new protagonist and focused on his story, his wife Mia, and their encounter with the Baker family and the Molded. RE8 continues our protagonist's journey, uncovering the mysteries of a European village and revealing his connection to the Mold. Both games explored the bioweapon experiments and conspiracies that had plagued the Resident Evil universe for decades, and essentially having a connection to our latest installments, as our main antagonist, Miranda, essentially was the reason for why everything happened, and her relationship with the Connections, who essentially helped her make everything happen. So, in a way, it just kind of came full circle once again. We have this large narrative that established the Umbrella Corporation and the fight against bioterrorism started from the latest installment. So in a way, it's as if we basically saying that RE8 came before RE1, which now that I think about it might be a bit confusing, but point being is RE7 and RE8 have an established connection to the Resident Evil timeline. Regardless of how you feel about the games, they are canon. And that's all for today, folks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you being here. This was an interesting video to make. I did not think I would make this one because I'm not sure how much of a deep dive this really was. This was just me talking. I just wanted to call it a deep dive because this was more research than I usually do, and it was kind of fun because, again, video games are cool and I like talking about them. Also, if you have noticed that I haven't posted in a while, life stuff happened, and you know, when life stuff happened, you kind of have to put the hobbies and the creativity stuff to the side. But then when life gets a little bit better, you can hop back on it, and that's exactly what I'm doing, hopping back on it. So if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Appreciate you being here. Please give the video a like, subscribe, comment down below, share it, you know, all the good stuff. Give the video some love, and once again, thank you for being here. Anyway, thank you for watching for the nth time that I said, and stay blessed and prosperous.